Hey, how's it going? Welcome to the Football Diary podcast. The Euros are a distant memory now. We've each pushed that down deep into our psyche, never to be thought about again until the next England games, that is. And our focus returns to transfer season, which we're in the middle of now. Obviously, if you've not seen my Manchester United piece, have a look where we look at Joshua Zirkzee and Leny Yoro and how they'll settle into Manchester United. That's over on YouTube. But today we're focusing on mainly Aston Villa, which is music to Myles' ears. Champions League club now, but also Mason Greenwood's move to Marseille and Riccardo Calafiori becoming an Arsenal defender very soon, it seems like. But guys, I'll start with you, Myles, actually, first of all. Jump right in with the Villa. New kit release, it's looking good. Players coming and going. There's a lot happening at Villa right now, but I think the big one for me is Moussa Diaby's leaving after a weird and crazy whirlwind 12 months at the club. Going to Saudi Arabia again, which has mixed feelings for a lot of fans. But how are you feeling about that one, first of all?
Yeah, to be fair, I probably should cover up the Reebok badge for the recording as we move on to Adidas. Diaby's it's a sad one in some ways, because I think we saw what Bailey did after having some time to settle. Last season, it really kind of blew up for him. And if anything, Diaby was posting better numbers in his first season than we saw of Bailey early doors. So you were kind of waiting for that same escalation to take place and him to have a really big key role this year, particularly when you consider that he featured a lot more than I think people really recognised last year, because he wasn't starting every game, but he was still a vital part of Villa's progression to the Champions League. And it's a player who has European experience, a player with a really high ceiling, and would inevitably have had an excellent impact as we kind of competed on all fronts this year. So it's a shame to lose that kind of quality from your squad. But then the other side of that is you've made 20 million profit on a player in a year who isn't an essential part of the 11. Like, he's not one of the pillars of this Aston Villa side that it's built on. It would be a lot heavier to lose Martinez or Watkins or even Bailey now, you would say. Yeah, it's mixed feelings about it. You take the financial gain and what it enables us to do across the rest of the window, as long as we do have a replacement in mind.
Yeah, he was a popular player, wasn't he, in his short stint at Villa, and I thought he was one of the most entertaining signings of the last summer window. I thought he was a really impressive kind of attacking contribution to Villa, and whenever he did feature, he made a difference, and that was a big thing for me. And I think that combined with Douglas Luiz leaving as well, we'll talk about the incomings in a minute, Myles, but I think that feels like a big hole out of the team, but you don't seem as worried.
I think that I'm not worried, because we've shown already in this window that we are willing to address the issues we have. And when you bring in that kind of money for a player, like we're talking about 60 million, that's a lot for a player that you brought in for about 40 the year before. I trust the whole club right now and the structure that we have in place to identify the right person to replace that. And I know we'll come on in a bit probably to talk about the reintroduction of Jadon Philogene into the side, and I wonder if that's an idea of replacement, and there are other players coming back from injury that can kind of fill gaps in the side. So we've got squad depth, and one of the things that we need to do to really bring in that star quality is bring funds in, and we've done that pretty successfully. And if we sell Duran as well, we're talking about nearly 100 million for those two players alone. I reckon a lot of that gets invested back into the side.
100%. Yeah, like I was saying earlier, stepping up to the Champions League still feels surreal, doesn't it? And I'm guessing you're going to get the Champions League badges on your new Villa shirt when it comes, right?
Yeah, certainly.
But yeah, Dave, I'll move on to you and talk about Diaby's move to Saudi Arabia as well, because we've been critical in the past about players moving in that direction, but the kind of sums of money that they're receiving in wages is insane, isn't it? And it's career-changing, it's life-changing, and you can kind of understand to a degree why Diaby will take this opportunity and maybe spend a couple of years over there and fill his boots in some ways. But sad to see him leave the Premier League, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a situation I think that's come about. I think it was a similar situation with Bailey actually last season. We wondered whether this would be a moment where he'd move on, or he'd actually come to the fore and start to really make a difference. Similar sort of situation for me. It's just unfortunate, really. I think how it's come about. It probably did take a bit more adaptation. Probably we mentioned about him becoming a little bit unsettled in the area, and I think that's probably had an impact on his performance as the season's gone on. I thought he started the season quite strongly, and as the season went on, obviously it didn't feature as much in the starting lineups. And I think it's a good opportunity for Villa. I think if this team's come in and offered them money in this situation, where they're now looking to reinvest back into the team, to obviously improve on the squad and improve that starting 11, because they've obviously lost Douglas Luiz, who was a big player for them in the last couple of years especially. I think it's a perfect moment for them to cash in. Let's be honest, he's not a young player anymore. I think this is probably the moment where they thought, do you know what, if his heart's not in, I don't want to say his heart's not in the club, but if he doesn't feel 100% comfortable at the club in this country, then it's probably worth moving on and seeking pastures new. But I thought it was a great player to watch when he was on his game. But I just thought that he could have had a better season for me. Without it started, I thought it started really promising, but it did tail off.
He gave us some brilliant moments through the season, definitely, and I think Villa fans won't begrudge him this move, actually, because last summer he came to Villa as opposed to going to Saudi then. Like, that was the big offer on the table, same team as well, and he made the choice to come to Villa for a year. He's helped us achieve our goal. He was definite highlights, and we'll all remember some excellent goals and some assists from him. So yeah, I'm not gutted by it, I'll be honest. It's a shame because it's always nice to see a player grow with your club and do well, but it's not one that stings maybe as much as seeing Luiz go.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Villa's midfield then, shall we, Myles? Because I think I kind of conceded last season that it's probably one of, if not the best midfield in the league. It was really impressive, the set of players they had, and the way they were moving them around was, with some freedom at some points. They could rotate quite nicely in midfield. Losing Luiz was a massive blow, but then signing a player like Amadou Onana feels like a huge gain as well, doesn't it? How do you see the midfield looking for Villa now?
I think that's an incredible signing. I think it does a lot of what Villa needed, because Luiz, as excellent as he is as a footballer, obviously the role that he kind of wants to fulfill on the pitch isn't necessarily one that always fitted our system. And we saw a bit of a weakness sometimes, particularly in defensive areas. And with Kamara's injury problems that we've had since he's been there, we did need someone that could come in and shore that midfielder. And we brought someone in who's got Premier League experience, is a regular international, and is 22. So when you talk about value for money, I think it's an excellent addition. Plus, he brings an air of physicality that Villa, I think, really lacked last season. He's 6'5". Yeah, that's a big huge presence to have. And when you look at Villa's record on set pieces last season, we were excellent at using set pieces in an attacking sense, but terrible defensively from them. I worried every time we conceded a corner. So just having that kind of physicality makes a huge difference. And we've done that across our editions. There's quite a few where you look at the aerial profile and it's clear that they've identified that as a particular weakness that we'd get pulled apart from next year in the Champions League. So bringing in someone who is so good at reading the game and is good with the ball at his feet, and his passing rate is incredible, and his intelligence and his movement is clear to see, but then also having a physical presence to kind of partner Kamara or kind of gel with Tielemans in the interim. I think it's an excellent balance, and that's what we really needed in that midfield.
Yeah, balance is looking really good. I'm keen to get your thoughts on a couple of players that are probably going to be reintroduced into the Villa side a lot more this season. Jadon Philogene obviously had an outstanding season with Hull, scoring a worldie along the way. I think that classed as his goal in the end. I hope so, because it was beautiful. Cameron Archer as well, after suffering relegation with Sheffield United, he's going to be no doubt given minutes with Villa this season too. How are you feeling about those young stars returning to the fold, mate?
I think they're two very different stories. Philogene, I think, definitely gets minutes. I think the fact that there were a lot of Premier League clubs looking at him, obviously Ipswich newly promoted, Everton were looking at him, but Villa activated that buyback. I don't think he necessarily would have taken that if he hadn't had assurances on what game time he would get. And I think with Diaby moving on, it is more likely that he'll get some minutes. I don't think he's a regular starter, but it's an excellent option off the bench and an excellent attacking option. Because you have to remember, we're selling Diaby, we're selling Duran, Zaniolo has left as well. So really we needed to fill those gaps and have some impact players. And I think he will be a big one for that in a game when we're looking to just turn something on and have someone that will run at defenders and kind of create a bit of chaos. That's probably going to be Philogene. Whereas Archer, I think we might move on again. I'm not convinced that he will stay. It's a shame because actually I think he looks like a great young forward. I think he's taken his opportunities in pre-season well, and I do think that it's someone that Villa fans would really like to see succeed at the club. But I think it was clear last season that we sold him because there wasn't a lot of trust in him. And he didn't do enough at Sheffield United, I think, to convince Emery that he is the one. We only brought him back because we had an obligation to. Whereas Philogene, we went out, got him so no one else could. So I do think there's a difference in conversation. The only caveat to that being with Duran on the way out, it leaves us with one senior striker. So maybe he is the backup to Watkins this year, but I think we'll probably be active in the window to bring someone else in to fill that role.
So Dave, picture the scene. You're watching Champions League telly. Villa are lining up with the Champions League theme playing. What other players do you think Villa could see coming in? They've got a bit of money to spend now. Can you see them looking to reinforce further? There's been a few names linked to the club, but who are you thinking of? Miles chipping at this point as well, if you disagree or agree.
I still feel like they need a bit more strength in the wing-back areas. I think Maatsen is a great signing, but I feel like they probably need somebody else there, particularly just to strengthen up a little bit and offer something a little bit different. I just feel as though they are vulnerable in certain phases during games in those areas. We've seen it with United against Villa in games when you can get at them in behind. And I just feel like if they got a couple of other wing backs or full backs in there, I think that really make a difference. I think Maatsen is a great signing for him. I think he'll make a hell of a difference.
Yeah, me too.
To be honest, it's an interesting one with Philogene. I feel like Villa's hand was forced in this situation. I feel like there's tremendous upside potential in a player like him. I agree with Miles. I think it's a completely different move to Cameron Archer. I feel like there's big expectation with Philogene, and I think he was in a situation if Ipswich did buy him, I think that would have been a great buy for them, because if you look at what Emery has done particularly over the last season, he's had players. I think Philogene, we're looking at the likes of Morgan Rogers going in there. Probably a lot of fans probably wouldn't have expected him to get the minutes that he's had and given the opportunities that he's had. So I think he'll be looking at that instance and thinking, I can come into this team and make my mark. Okay, I might not be playing every single week, but when I do get the opportunity, that's the kind of manager I want to be playing under, and knowing that he will appreciate me as a player, but looking to make a difference. So it is quite an interesting situation, because I thought Ipswich would have been a great move for him, but I feel like it will make a real difference at Villa, to be honest. I think that role that Moussa Diaby took up in the squad, it's perfect for a player like Jadon Philogene.
I think he'll have a similar season to Garnacho, by the way, because when we said Garnacho would have a breakthrough last season, and he definitely did that for United. Philogene, I think, is on the cusp of that for Villa if he does get the minutes.
Potentially, but I'll be honest, I see a world where he makes a bit of an impact, plays some games, and we sell him next summer for 25 million. Because the Villa are being very smart about this at the moment. If you look, they've made about 6 million profit on Archer and Philogene by selling them for a year and then bringing them back. Like, they got Archer significantly cheaper than they sold him for. And with Philogene, they had that buyback, which also meant that they got 5 million of their own funds back. So they've been very clever with the business. I do wonder if it was a case of, I can see other clubs are identifying him as a target. We can get him cheaper because of that buyback, and we could probably make profit on him again in 12 months. So it wouldn't surprise me to see us do that. Dave's right when he talks about the fullback areas. I think Maatsen solves that problem on the left, and he should be Villa's left back for years to come. I think he's an absolutely sensational player. I'm really looking forward to seeing him at a Villa shirt. The right-hand side, I think we'll probably see a lot more of Ezri Konsa there this year, though. And I do wonder if that solves a lot of the counter-attacking problem, because we'll go back to that system where the left wing-back pushes forward and the right-back tucks in, and we are more solid at the back if someone counters. And you also have to remember, we then have an Anna in the midfield to disrupt that counter-attacking move to come through the middle. So I think with Mings being back fit, if he is back fit, I wouldn't be surprised to see us sign another centre-back with some of the people I've seen us looked at if Carlos moves on, because there was a lot of talk of us trying to sell Carlos. He's on big wages. He's getting older now as well. So maybe a centre-back comes in, but the main one they seem to be looking at is that player just behind the striker. And there's been talk of loads. João Felix was a massive one. It's been talked about for over a year now.
Yeah.
Apparently Atletico want far too much money. Rafinha from Barca was another one. But Barca are looking for every penny they can get to try and get the Williams deal over the line. We obviously tried to poach that one as well, but it looks like that one's pretty much wrapped up now. So I'm interested to see what profile of player we identify, because we've not really bought superstars under Unai Emery. Like, we tried it with Coutinho probably too late, and it didn't work out as well as we wanted. And then Emery's come in and identified profiles of player. And Diaby and Torres, although they are bigger names than Villa would have got 12 months earlier, they aren't out and out superstars like some of the players they're being linked with now. So it's interesting seeing the progression of the club and what they look to do.
Well, it's smart business though, because the fees go up dramatically when you do go
Yeah.
to that next tier of Champions League level play, don't they? So
Exactly.
I think it's the right place for them to kind of do their bidding at the minute.
But yeah, that's a good point though. If you look at how many minutes of Champions League football are in that squad right now, it's something they really need to identify and kind of improve and get a bit more of that leadership in there, because you don't want to see them get to that stage and kind of be rattled by it. You need some experience there. And obviously Emery in himself brings an aura around European football that means that he will get the side up for it, absolutely. But it would definitely help having the right profile of player in there. One quick claim, Dave mentioned why Philogene would come back because he's seen the progression of Morgan Rogers. I'm telling you now, people are not ready for the season Rogers is going to have. Rogers is going to be instrumental for Villa this year. I'm saying 10 goals, 10 assists kind of season, real breakthrough sort of thing. I think Emery really trusts him earlier than I think a lot of people anticipated. And the way he finished last season and the way he's kind of approaching pre-season even now, I think we have a real player on our hands there. I think people are going to be looking back at that 8 million we paid for him and thinking that's the bargain of the last 10 years, it feels like.
Can I ask a quick question about and a question I'm wondering about is how the dynamics of that midfield change now that Louise is gone and Arna's in there, because I feel like that places a lot of importance on the shoulders of Tielemans in terms of creativity. Because
good, I think it should
take that
though. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what's interesting, and that's why I quite like the Onana signing in terms of we didn't just go out and buy another Douglas Luiz, because otherwise we may as well not have sold Luiz. The Luiz replacement was Tielemans 12 months ago, and that's perfect to me. Onana is there to complement Kamara where possible. We can play a double pivot now when Kamara is fit, and when he's not fit, we don't completely miss out on defensive solidity. The midfield's really interesting to me because you've now got options everywhere. You got three DMs, because don't forget they bought Baranachea from Juventus, Kamara and Onana. They've then got Tielemans and McGinn probably playing for that other role as well. And then you've got that left-sided midfield role that will be one of Jacob Ramsey or Morgan Rogers. And that's such good depth all of a sudden. Like, that's really, really encouraging. And Ross Barkley, don't forget.
Of course,
Yeah, Tielemans will do the majority of that creative work, but we have other things there to kind of make that tick over. McGinn can do that work. Barkley will do that work. And I think a lot of our creativity will come up from out wide, and it will be Rogers and Bailey in particular. But the weird one is there's still talk of Spurs trying to get Jacob Ramsey off us and offering us Lo Celso in return. And Emery clearly loves Lo Celso, but I would be a bit gutted at that, I'll be honest.
Well, I mean, look at the depth you've just reeled off. I think you've kind of highlighted how Villa are definitely making themselves ready for a Champions League season. And I think you're selling them short a little bit for their readiness for it as well, because they've got players like Emi Martinez is going to thrive in that scenario. I think Ollie Watkins will as well. I cannot wait to see how they adapt, especially Watkins, because he's ready for this. He really is. They showed that at the Euros. He's an elite striker. Stacking players in the right positions for another big season. Another club doing that, it feels like, is Arsenal with the signing of Riccardo Calafiori. It's not confirmed yet, but Calafiori had a decent Euros when Italy failed quite miserably, and has had a whirlwind season with Bologna, hasn't he, as well, who seem to have their best players being picked off this summer straight away, which is sad to see. But Calafiori, he's going to be trying to get into an already very established defence for Arsenal, isn't he? And it'll be interesting to see what he brings to that defence, because it's a very settled, very composed pair of defenders they've already got. Calafiori is a very different kind of defender, though, isn't he, Myles?
Yeah, and I think he isn't competing for the centre-back role, though. I think Arteta sees him as that left-back solution, because Zinchenko, I think, is comfortably the weak link for Arsenal defensively. And Jakub Kiwior came in and did quite a good job there, actually, towards the end of the season. And Arteta has changed that system to be a bit like City's, where you're basically playing four centre-backs across the back line. With Ben White on the right, I think it'll be Calafiori on the left. The person who I think will feel most begrudged by this signing is probably Jurrien Timber, who obviously got that horrible injury at the start of the season, has come back now, and you wonder where he fits into the side. He probably doesn't on a regular basis, but it's a long season. And I think having that level of depth is something that Arsenal will really, really lean on through the course of a season. And it's what they've been building over the last year. Like, you look at when they signed Trossard, it wasn't a player that we necessarily thought, Arsenal desperately needed, but has added an excellent option and excellent depth and changed a lot of games for them. And having that defensive quality to do that as well, particularly with a change in format of the Champions League and them looking to go one step further in the Premier League, I don't think you can argue with that.
Yeah, he's a player that's had a near career-threatening injury about 5 years ago as well when he was in Roma's youth team, and to see him in the position he is now after the season he's had is great. And he kind of credits Jose Mourinho with a lot of that element of his game, that steel, that determination to get back fit and to get into the team. And you can see elements of that in him, can't you, Dave? And he's been dubbed by some Arsenal fans already as the next Maldini, which I think is a bit premature. But there's definitely comparisons in style, and I think his anticipation and his when needed, his hair now, there are shades of Maldini, but I think he is the greatest in that position, I think, of all time. But definite room for kind of optimism for Arsenal fans, isn't there?
I think so. And I think a lot of... I know the initial thought for a lot of fans is, okay, well, where does he fit in? Well, who do you take out of this team for him to come in? But I think, especially being a fan of a club that's, not had this kind of depth or strength in depth, having strong players all across the bench, I think it's easy to get into that mindset. Because that's not you need numbers, you need strength in depth, and you need the very best players on the bench as well as on the pitch to play. And I think they're definitely getting back there. I think they've had options. You look across that front line, they've obviously got Trossard and Martinelli who can play in different roles. Havertz in there as well. Yeah. But I think this is an area where I do feel as though I agree with Myles. I think Zinchenko at times. And I think actually Arteta, you look at him, especially in some of the bigger games, he has substituted him quite reasonably early on in games at times, and he's noticed that he's probably not the most compact kind of player. And I really like Calafiori. I thought as soon as I've seen little of him, to be honest, but when he came in to the frame at the Euros, you could just see straight away it's an absolute Rolls Royce of a player, so easy on the eye. And to be honest, it's not very often I can admire a defender and the way they operate, but just the way he plays the game, it's brilliant to watch. And we're reading a little bit about his story that you mentioned as well. I think it's great to see players going through these really difficult moments. You see so many stories about youth players not making it and almost look at an absolute certainty to make it, and they have these terrible injuries that ruin the career. I think it's great to see him come out the other side and really come onto the centre stage. Yeah,
as a player, I think he'll definitely provide something for Arsenal, and you're going to chime in on that as well, Myles. Anything else you want to add on Calafiori?
I just think the comparison is noticeable, that quite often we see Arteta almost a little bit later imitate something that Pep is doing at City, and we can talk about, well, where does he fit in? And they've already got all these centre-back options. But think about City. The right-back slot is taken, it's Kyle Walker's. But then at centre-back, they've got John Stones, Ruben Diaz, Akanji, Ake, and who am I forgetting? Gvardiol, that we thought was probably going to play centre-back. Now, Gvardiol became that left-back, and we can kind of see the idea that Calafiori might do the same thing. And no one questions, well, why have City got those 5 quality centre-backs? What are they supposed to do with all of them? They rotate it, it works, and it's what gets them through a really long season, having those quality options. It's not a surprise to me to watch Arteta look at that and go, I want a bit of that, and do the same thing, because he's trying to catch up with them. And we saw it with the idea of a fullback that moved into midfield last year, and then he tried to do that with Zinchenko. Like, we very often see them kind of emulate that sort of style. Yeah. Guardiola has set that influence. And this is something I think Calafiori probably brings to this Arsenal side, that solidity as a defensive left-back, who also is quite comfortable carrying the ball forward, as Gvardiol does.
Curious to see who else Arsenal can add in this transfer window as well, as always. I mean, they had a big transfer window last summer, didn't they? And I don't think they could go that big this time. But they definitely are trying to catch City, and they've gone the right way about it so far. So we'll see. But Dave, I want to get your opinion first.
Talking about.
Yeah.
It's worth noting, I think, like the talk of Nketiah maybe moving on, talk of Emile Smith-Rowe moving on as well. So academy players who have kind of come up at the ranks, and maybe now it's time for some of them to move on, because it's a sign that Arsenal are trying to buy that elite level now, no?
Yeah, well, I think there's other clubs that have been doing that really well to kind of make their their money that they reinvest in the team more available by having youth players move on. And Arsenal haven't really done that or had much of a history of doing in that. In fact, they've probably given young players more of a chance than many other clubs would have done. Emil Smith-Rowe
they
had a tough season last year, whereas the previous year he was so good, you're thinking he's probably going to break into the England team. So yeah, maybe he should have moved on last year. Same with Nketiah, had his chances, many minutes, but not really shown that he's that level. So maybe they are actually seeing the light now and going, yeah, let's move these players on, because it's pure profit, isn't it, at the end of the day? Dave, I want to get your thoughts on United, because obviously I had my say on it earlier in the week, but whilst we're talking about Calafiori as a sign-in for Arsenal, what do you think of Leny Yoro for Manchester United? Obviously, he's had a game under his belt against Rangers, which was, a good performance, a good first start. But he's a kind of defender I think United needed as well. I've talked about his partnership with Martinez and how that could be at centre-back. What are your thoughts on him?
I think it's a great signing. I think it's great signs to see United actually getting into these positions of getting the very best talents in Europe again, because let's be honest, we've not been there. We've not been at the races in terms of recruitment over the last decade, especially. I think particularly in his first game, it's great to see what he can offer. You look how uncomfortable he is on the ball. I think it's crazy to think that he's just 18, and I think that's a great sign. It shows the maturity he's got and this calm head he's got on his shoulders. And I saw a little bit of him actually when Lille came up against Villa last year in Europe. And I was really impressed with what I saw. I thought he manages the game really well, really impressive. And you can see what United and a lot of the top clubs in Europe of why they've been chasing him, because he looks like he's destined to be playing at the very top level. Let's not forget he's very young, so it'll be interesting to see how he's handled throughout the season. But he's going to be, I could see him starting pretty much most weeks, because if you look at that centre-back, those centre-back options, we're not blessed with depth or talent in those areas, really. If you take Lisandro Martinez and him out of the equation, we're really struggling, to be honest. So I think it's a top sign. It's great. So hopefully it's a sign of things to come, and we can build it.
Well, I was thinking that he's a player that brings that skill set in defence of just calmness and reading the game rather than going in for tackles, and he doesn't react, he anticipates, doesn't he? And I think that's a real asset in a defender. He stays on his feet more often than not, whereas Martinez could be the crunching tackler that we need last ditch, you never know. But it feels like United are identifying talent for positions, making financially sound decisions as well, Myles. And then I think another one that kind of piques my kind of interest in how this club is progressing is selling Mason Greenwood. Now, clearly he couldn't feature at the club anymore. I think we were quite clear on we didn't want him back at the club, Dave, as Man United fans, did we? And I think most United fans, most sane grown-up United fans anyway, that don't go on Twitter, generally feel like that as well. But selling him for a decent fee, and also putting in there a 50% sell-on clause, because he's probably going to be sold for decent money, you'd think, at some point. Seems like smart business again, Myles. Is this a change for Manchester United, do you think?
I don't know how I feel about this one. I'll be honest. Because I don't like talking about this as a business venture. I know that it is. And ultimately, it's an asset that the club have that they can make a lot of money off. And they've got to protect themselves in that way. And it's better than seeing him back in the side. But I feel a bit uncomfortable about United just profiting off this situation. And the sell-on clause, again, logical from a business point of view, but it's maintaining that attachment to him a little bit. And I really want to see what United's response is to some of the kind of outcry for what are you going to do with this money? Because inevitably it will go back into the club's books. But if they are smart enough and moral enough to think about investing some of it into a lot of support groups, a lot of charities, or even using it to kind of bring up the women's side and really highlight how they want to forward that kind of profile in the game, then excellent. But do you know what I mean? It's really hard to look at this well done United for moving him on, because it's not without its own payback to them as well. I don't know, maybe I'm the wrong person to talk about this.
Apparently there's a buyback clause in there as well, which I thought was strange.
You're joking?
I don't think there would be. Surely not.
I think I saw it in Telegraph.
It's a sell-on clause, I understand, because, you can imagine, and what's he gone for, like 20, 25 million initially?
And 30, wasn't it?
Which is quite lowball from a player that he was and the prospect he was. And I can see that United have invested a lot of time in this young prospect, and, they had high hopes for him, and he was worth probably upwards of 50 million at one point, Who
Way
knows
more
what he
than
could have
that,
been
yeah.
worth? For his stupid actions, he's basically made himself unplayable for the club. And it was a moral minefield anyway, even having him still associated with the club, and a legal minefield as well, because they couldn't just cut his contract. Like, it was found not guilty, basically, for whatever you think about that verdict. That's a whole other matter. So they had to do the best thing they could for the club and for the player. I think loaning him out was the best short-term move, and selling him and trying to get the best money they can for him feels like trying to get some return on the investment they've put in him in some ways, don't you think?
I think there's definitely a view there that he was this asset that's depreciated in value massively. I think I agree with you saying that I think he was worth potentially 80, 90 million upside potential. And the club view that like this is a business view. They've lost a massive portion of money there through this obviously situation, and again it's not nice to talk about, but this is seen as recouping some of that money. But it's obviously down to United what they do in terms of almost looking to save the situation as such, because they've not come out of this in a great light at times. You look at the statement from Richard Arnold, that whole situation was terrible.
It really was badly handled.
Really ugly. Yeah, it was awful for the club. And I do agree with a lot of people are saying, and there's a lot of it on social media, but I'm in a situation now where I'm just so tired of it all. Everyone wants it to go. We don't ever want to revisit this. But again, there are things that need to be fixed and ensure that things like this don't happen again, and the club deals with this matter in a much better way.
Yeah, it's probably symptomatic of the way the club has been run. It's kind of ignored its moral compass to an extent, and that's not like how United were when we were growing up. And I think you're right, Myles, to a degree. We almost need to offset the guilt and the negative impact this has had on the club by doing something positive with the money they've received. I don't know what, but I feel like that would be a really positive thing to do.
It would, but it's more than being about the club. It's more than a PR kind of stunt or campaign. It is down to the morality of it. And I think it's difficult because we are football fans, and you two in particular, you're Man United fans. So, of course, you're thinking of it from a sphere of, I want my club to come out of this well and not do the wrong thing. But take the football club out of it for a second and just think about the situation in isolation. That's what's most important. Are they doing the right thing? Not from how they are perceived, not from what's going to keep their fans happy, but legitimately the right thing. That's what needs to be done. Because that's not been done at any corner of this venture by anyone, it seems. And it's difficult because you're in a situation where the alleged victim obviously has forgiven him and they've moved forward in their lives, and therefore some people will openly argue, well, if they've been able to do that, then we all need to move on from it, and it's fine for Manchester United to kind of move in this way. But I don't think that accounts for the feelings of everyone else that idolises the club and will have their own internal struggles about domestic violence in particular. And we know that it goes hand in hand with football far too often. And it's a really awful situation that really this would be an absolute landmark opportunity to showcase we do want to support everyone in their following of football. Like, you've got girls, Mike, that are massive Man United fans. And wouldn't it be so wonderful to be able to say, the club you follow make me proud in standing up for you? That's an amazing thing that they could do. But it feels like now it's gone so far down the line. Dave's right. Yeah. You want it done rather than it being right sometimes because they missed the opportunity. The boat's sailed. So I don't know. It's a difficult one now. I don't really know how the club move forward with this one, but at least he's off the books. I suppose that's a start.
We've not been in the best light again today. There's an article that's come out on Sky Sports about the women's team. Mary saying there have been a lot of red flags, maybe over the last couple of years.
Well,
duty of care that the club have shown towards the women's team, and you look at the revolving door of senior players that have left the club. I mean, it doesn't look good, does it, to be honest?
No. Something there. There's no smoke without fire at all. And I think with that many big name players deciding not to renew their contracts and to seek, playing elsewhere, when United women's team has had a relatively decent amount of success, says a lot. So yeah, there's a lot of things that are coming up that don't feel like a surprise. I am glad that the likes of Earps are finding these big moves still before it's too late, because she's 31 now, and she's going to PSG, which is
I'm glad she's come out and spoken about it, though.
True, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
You knew she was going to, though, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. It's things like this, though, especially her profile, it's absolutely massive. It's things need to be spoken about for changes to be made. I'm sure in Ineos there will be changes that will be made to that area. But this isn't a new thing this season. You look at the players that we lost last year. It's not a new thing. So I'll just hope that changes are made sooner rather than later.
Yeah,
and we can just start to have a little bit of excitement, because if you look at what the trajectory that team was on, we've taken a massive fall, really. The women's team.
Massively. Well, the club's doing a lot, I think, off the field to make its footballing and business image look a lot better, and I think that's the thing I'm trying to sort of make light out from the Greenwood situation. But also we had the sale of Willie Camboala as well. We got 10 million, I think, for him, which was decent for the amount of minutes he played, and a sell-on clause for him as well as 50%.
Yeah, last year of his contract, wasn't he?
So that feels like smart business. I think even the fees we paid for Xerxes and for Yoro as well feel market value and don't feel like overly inflated. Reported wages of about 50k for each of them as well, which again doesn't feel like Anthony level numbers, so some positivity at least.
Does it shut off the move for Ligt bringing in Yoro? Because you're right, your defensive options when you look beyond Yoro and Martinez are so limited now that you could probably do with both. But then what I do like about the signing of Yoro is how many times have we seen Man United over the last 10 years go out and buy someone with a big reputation at kind of what you would class as prime age, throw money at them, and then them completely fall off. Whereas one thing United have done really well over the last couple of years is they've introduced players like Højlund, Garnacho, Mainu, and a younger profile is actually being able to succeed. Yoro feels like that kind of signing. Xerxes feels like that kind of signing. De Ligt is an excellent player and probably would make your squad better, but is there a risk of it being another one of those almost like false Galactico things that United have done for the last few years? Like, surely you need another centre-back as well.
Possibly, and I don't think I'd be gutted if we didn't sign him in particular, because for that reason, I think it feels more like United of the last few seasons, buying big players, and who knows, it could be really big wages as well. De Ligt has still got a lot to offer. There's been a lot spoken about his injury record, but he's played more minutes than you realise, I think, in the last 5 years. And for a young player, that's going to take its toll eventually. I think last season was just the culmination of that. Excellent defender, though. I think he'd be perfect for what we're trying to build, but wouldn't be gutted if we missed out on him. I think they're still waiting on big sales before we do anything else. I know McTominay was talked about as being a departure, which is, again, an academy player, which would be pure profit.
It seems like we've reached a situation with the De Ligt transfer where it's pretty much done. If we want it, we know what's required to pay for him. But we were in a position where we were in talks for Yoro, and he was the priority. Really.
He's got a relationship with Ten Hag as well.
And it's no secret that we need to sell before we buy again.
I don't know who you sell, though. I'm not sure you've got many sellable assets. I think that's half the reason. I think it's half the reason that Ten Hag's come out and said that him and Sancho are fired now, because he knows that if he makes it really clear he wants rid of him, then the value drops massively. So this idea of him being reintroduced into the squad, late in the window, Sancho's gone. Of course he is.
Well, I don't know if United and PSG are going to do a similar sort of move to what a lot of clubs have been doing with financial fair play, with Agate, attaching big price tags to them, and making a kind of taking advantage of that situation. Agate seems like the one that they're looking at as well. I don't think there's not any sellable assets. I think there's some players in there on big contracts, which is an issue.
But who goes for money? Apparently, who's buying those players?
Scott McTominay is probably the one who's going to bring the most money in.
How much do you get for McTominay in today's market?
Anthony, you'd have to take a massive cut on him too, and I think he will probably leave at some point.
No one's buying him.
They will.
If you can get around 30 million for McTominay, I don't think that's outrageous. I think that's a good fair fee, to be fair.
The only ones I think you could realistically say you would sell this window, unless Saudi come in for Casemiro, you'll sell McTominay if you can, but I'm not sure who pays that money. Maybe Fulham as a replacement for Paulinho. I wouldn't be surprised to see you sell Diallo this summer.
No, it's his year this year. It's his year this year, mate. He's going to be big.
I'm not sure. I think the
so.
lack of minutes he got last season tells me that there are other players ahead of him in the order, and maybe you sell Sancho. But I don't. That's one of United's problems. They've let their squad get far too old or far too young, and the young ones you want to hold on to. The old ones you now can't sell. So if you're saying you got to bring money in, I don't see it. Like, okay, you could get 30 million for McTominay. Look at Villa. It's a good comparison right now. We brought in nearly 50 million for Luiz, 60 for Diaby, 40 for Duran, and that we're good for the window. Where do United get 100 million from
Apparently
this window?
they're open to selling Maguire, Lindelof. I think I saw Wan-Bissaka.
Can't afford to.
Anthony and Sancho.
Of course, but no one's buying Anthony right now. Not for anywhere near the kind of money that United need for him. You bought him for nearly 100 million. He's on massive wages. Anything you sell him for will be a massive, massive loss. And I don't think he wants to go because no one's giving him those wages. Sancho's on crazy wages. It'll be hard to get a deal done there, but maybe more likely. No one's buying Maguire or Lindelof because, again, wages are too high. And you can't afford to lose more centre-back depth. So I just think United can say we're open to selling these players, but show me the buyers. We've seen how slow this transfer market has been already because no one's got any money. United need money off people, but no one's got it. So you've got to have a really primed asset, or you've got to have Saudi Arabia.
I think with the people who've got in charge now, we can't sell them. We're never going to sell them because that team,
I think that's more likely.
Now is as we've seen now with these deals with Yoro and Xerxes. I think we've done quite well, to be honest. I think it's quite reasonable.
I will have to say, though, that the players that you're saying have dropped off in value massively. It only takes one very good season or even a semi-good season for their value to sort of go straight back up to a good level again. And I think with the coaching team he's got surrounding him now, including obviously Ruud van Nistelrooy back at the team in a coaching capacity, I think it looks more positive that we can coach Anthony back to good form, Sancho back to good form and find a system that works, because I felt like it was all on Ten Hag. He had the full reign of how things were going and who was being bought and how they fit into the team. And that's got to change. And I think that's now the systems in place for that to happen. As long as he's not too stubborn, Ten Hag, to not take any advice. That's the only concern. But we'll see.
And Agate and Ligt improved that squad so much.
Oh, massively,
They are perfect profiles for it. I think they've been really well identified in that sense, particularly with what you've already done. So if you can get them over the line, fantastic. But if it's a case of we can't do that until we sell, then I would be worried a little bit, to be honest. Because you've not got Champions League money coming in this year. That makes a massive difference. And I do think, you're right, Mike, you can get some of those assets back, but not this summer.
No, that's it. I think
if you
we're
sold
playing that long
Wan-Bissaka
game
for 10 million, does that not feel like such a loss? That's what I've seen reported, though, 10, 15 million.
He's in the last year of his contract, isn't he, Wan-Bissaka as well? I think they should be looking for more than that.
Well, he's a good squad player.
I'd take
still,
him for 10 million.
I'm going to say, I think he's still got plenty to offer. But guys, I think we've exhausted all the transfer news for this week. There's not much on the horizon in the football world again until we talk next week either, apart from more potential transfer news, which we'll react to as and when, if it's big news going through, especially.
Arsenal, Man United on Sunday.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to tell us much, though, is it really?
No, I don't think so.
And I think the Olympics kick off very soon, don't they? So there might be some football nuggets in there for us to keep an eye on. But are you guys over the Euros yet?
Don't talk about it. I'm over it until someone mentions it.
Keep picking that
lost
scat,
memory.
Yeah, I hope so.
Although you can until the 2nd of August, you can go to the FA website and apply for the England job, guys. So
I saw that. Very interesting. Follow us on socials. We're at Football Diary UK pretty much everywhere. And of course, please do like, subscribe, follow us on audio platforms and on YouTube. Until next week, guys. Speak to you soon.
See you later.
See you later.